You live?
Yep, now we're live.
All right, we're live. Welcome back to the RotoPros pre-lock show for Wednesday, April 4th for the main slate. And let's dive right into things. We have a five.
Okay,
All right.
Hold on.
Oh, I'm hearing
I got
myself.
some technical issues. 1 sec.
All right. We're live. We're having some temporary audio malfunctions.
All right, we're good. We're good. I had I don't know.
We're back. Matt says we're back, everybody, so we're good to go. Anyways, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games tonight. We have 3 2.25 lineups out right now. And let's start with pitchers. Matt, what pitchers do you like for the night slate? Has anything changed since the podcast with Greg and you this morning? You and Greg?
Wait, I'm just confused. 2.25 lineups. What does that mean?
2 games and a half of a lineup in one game, or one team.
Oh, so we got 5 out of 10. All right. Yeah, that's okay. That makes sense. I definitely haven't changed my opinion on Jon Gray. I think he's by far the best pitcher on the slate, especially for DraftKings, even on FanDuel though, but especially DraftKings where some guys are more expensive than him. Gray is facing the Padres, and we don't have the information on Will Myers yet, right? But I think we can assume that he won't be. Actually, it doesn't really matter that much. Myers is a good hitter. If he's out, it's an additional bump for Gray, but I like him enough anyway that I don't really care. It's just he's still the best pitching option regardless. So you can't really go from 90%. You can't get that much more exposure to someone. Like, I'm pretty much going to be all in on Jon Gray. I think he's by far the best choice. So beyond that, the guys we were talking about last night, Aaron Sanchez, Sean Manaea, I had mentioned Julius Chassin. I still feel pretty good about the pecking order there. I still think Aaron Sanchez is the number 2 guy. The line movement is starting to get a little concerning for him. So the over-under is rising in that game. It looks like there's some sharp money on the over, but it could be a bit of a public bias to the over, which is the complete opposite of what we were looking at last night with the line movement. So I'm just kind of confused about the betting data on Aaron Sanchez. I think he's cheap enough and it's a good enough matchup that even if he's a little worse of a pick than we thought, I'm still fine to use him. I'm considering lowering Sanchez because of this line movement in favor of both Gray and Sean Manaea.
Interesting. Just okay. So those are the only 3 pitchers you plan on using tonight.
Only 3 pitchers. I guess it depends on how many lineups you're going with. Like, I still think Julius Chassin is worth consideration as number 4, but the reason I probably won't end up with him is because there aren't any offenses to pay up for. Like, I think he is a decent value for his price and for his ownership because the Cardinals have a lot of righties in their lineup. We don't have an official lineup yet, but just their projected lineup and just looking at their depth chart, it really is just Matt Carpenter, switch hitting Dexter Fowler, and Colton Wong, who's not good anyway. The rest of the Cardinals are right-handed. It's very right-hand heavy. So it's a good matchup for Chassin. You don't need to save the salary, and expected output-wise, he's clearly behind the guys that are actually good pitchers. Chassin is not a good pitcher, but he's good against righties, and the Cardinals have a lot of them, and he's at home. So I think I will just stick to the first 3, and I'm probably thinking something like 90% Gray, and then kind of going even for the last 2 spots on Manaea and on Aaron Sanchez. So that'd be like 55% each. And that's sort of where I stand for now, unless something changes with these lineups. Because I don't really know what to make of the sharp money being on the White Sox a little bit and mostly the over. It's not nothing. The over-under's gone from 9 to just about 9.5. And even though, well, actually, we are seeing more movement towards the Blue Jays side of the game. So it is possible that the reason the over-under is going up so much is just it's an increase in expected output for Toronto. I like the Blue Jays as a stack anyway, so maybe it's just more output there and it's just no change for Sanchez. It's just that yesterday when we did the podcast, I thought that sharp money was on the under for both teams, and now at the very least it's neutral. So that's all that's changed.
I like the idea of going all in on Gray and then 50-50 on Manaea Sanchez.
Yeah, I mean, it just depends how much you want to diversify. Gray is the best value. and he has the most upside. He probably has the highest floor. So he's the best pick overall. It's just he could be the highest owned pitcher. It also depends what sort of tournaments you're playing in. So I would guess that in something like the $1 or the $3 on DraftKings, Gray could be in the 30s in percent ownership. But if you're talking about higher stakes, like $100 and up, Gray could be well over 50% owned because I think sharper players will be on him. I personally just like to play lower stakes and play a lot of different lineups because you can get the good values at lower ownership. You just play more lineups for less money. That usually ends up being more profitable unless you're being really contrarian. So if I were to really like Julius Chassin, like let's say the Yankees were on the night slate offensively and you needed to pay down at pitching to use them, I'd actually probably rather do that in a higher stakes tournament where Chassin would have no ownership. But at low stakes, none of the pitchers will be that popular anyway. So you just go with the best values if you're playing at low stakes. And the best value is John Gray. I don't have any problem with being all in on him.
Yeah. I like Sean Manaea too as a pivot off of Aaron Sanchez. The ownership, purely in GPPs is a way to, have a leg up on the competition. I think he's just just as favorable as a matchup. The Rangers were not that good against left-handers last season. They struck out at the fourth highest rate, 25%, and they had a 93 WRC plus with a 319 WOBA, which is about average, but the K percentage is the thing that caught my eye. And Naya last year.
Well, the downside for Manaea is more extreme than those numbers would suggest because Texas didn't have Adrian Beltre for about half of last season. So against lefties, they might strike out just as much, or isn't going to change the strikeout rate necessarily, but it changes the potential for big innings. It changes the expected run potential. So it's not as good of a matchup as it would have been to face Texas last year without Adrian Beltre. He's their best hitter. Gallo is the best power hitter, but Beltre is definitely their best hitter overall, especially for a left-handed pitcher going against them. So I consider this to still be a plus matchup for the strikeouts, but I don't think it's a plus matchup in terms of the run production. The over-under for the game is 8.5. The Rangers are the A's are minus 165 favorites, so that's about 3 3/4 runs, and the over-under is moving up a little too. So it's like 3.5 to 4 runs for the Rangers, kind of just normal. The implied run total. It's just that the Rangers do strike out a lot against lefties, so that is helpful, even with Beltre in there. I think there is a lot of downside for Manaea. There's just a lot of upside too.
So you started on saying your projected ownership. What do you think you're looking at
for hitters?
For between Manaea and Sanchez?
I think I'm looking to have them about the same, maybe 90, 60, 50 between Gray and then Sanchez Manaea. Something where it's nearly all in Gray and then just about the same amount of Manaea and Sanchez. Because I think Sanchez is safer and will be higher owned. I think Manaea is riskier and will be lower owned. And Manaea may have the higher ceiling because he gets more strikeouts and he's facing not a more strikeout prone team, but I guess it's just that he gets more strikeouts. Aaron Sanchez really doesn't. That's the biggest difference between the two. It's also a little bit better park for Manaea. So I think with all of that considered, I probably want to have them about the same amount. But I'm not completely set on that. Like, I think you can make the argument for either one. It's just very clear to me that both of them are behind John Gray.
And if purely for ownership reasons, Manaea is probably the better play because Sanchez is the highest owned pitcher on the slate, I would think.
Well, no. I think that the reason I'll have them 50-50 or so is partially due to the ownership. If they were going to have the same ownership, I would have Aaron Sanchez in more lineups. I think that Sanchez expected output, like his average expected output, given the circumstances, is higher than Manaea's is, but it's close. I think that the ownership just sort of makes them about equal in terms of like how much of them I want to use.
Yeah, that's basically what I was trying to say. I don't know if that's it. Anyways, let's move on to the offenses. There's one clear-cut offense to use, and it's the Blue Jays. They are projected to score 5.73 runs against Carson Fulmer, who is a young pitcher that has yet to figure it out yet. This is an offense we both like, and then there's another offense or half of an offense, I guess you can say, that we're interested in. It's the lefties for the Brewers going against Carlos Martinez. Martinez was a pitcher that was pretty good last year for the most part, but did show visible struggles against left-handers in particular. He had I believe it was a 337 on base against left-handers, and he basically, was very good against right-handers and struggled against left-handers. And the Brewers recently added Christian Yelich to their lineup, in addition with Eric Thames and Travis Shaw. So this, in a fairly, it's also in a plus hitters environment, so that should give a boost to the left-handers for the Brewers.
Yeah, so the Blue Jays first. It's a little bit different of a lineup today. Yangervis Solarte is not playing. They have Devin Travis in the leadoff spot. Granderson's batting fourth. Travis at 3,100, I think, is a really strong play. And then Granderson, he was a good play as a leadoff hitter. He's a good play fourth, too. He's 3,200. Donaldson and Smoke are expensive. So I do like the Blue Jays as a stack. But outside of the stacks, like plugging them into other lineups, I think I wouldn't use Donaldson and Smoke too much as plugs just because of the prices. But Travis and Granderson, I think, are good value plays. That's probably it as far as value plays on Toronto. Kendrys Morales is batting seventh, and he's 3K. I think that's kind of an okay spot. I mean, I would include him in some stacks if you're making multiple stacks. But I don't really see him as that strong of a value play, especially since he's a better hitter right-handed, and he will be batting left-handed tonight. But all the Blue Jays warrant some consideration. I think the guys I like the most, though, are Travis and Granderson. And then, the Brewers, Thames, Yelich, and Shaw. Those are the three guys I'm targeting. But I don't really think I want to use anyone else too much on Milwaukee. I think I'll just have those three guys plugged into lineups. I think one issue is that the Cardinals go to left-handed relievers at some point in the game, and you have Eric Thames switched out. And then the Cardinals do have an okay bullpen. They have a lot of weird names. They have this guy, Jonathan Hicks, who's throwing the hardest fastball of any pitcher in baseball right now. I don't know what to make of the Cardinals bullpen too much, but they are going to perform better than Carlos Martinez. Like, stacking against the White Sox, you're going to see a lot of bad relievers. Stacking against the Cardinals, you won't really see that same effect. So certainly lower on the Brewers than I am on the Blue Jays, but I do like those lefties. And I think Shaw is probably my favorite play of the three. Yelich is more expensive, and then Thames has a chance to be pinch hit for late in the game if they use a lefty on him. I don't think that you have the same worry with Yelich and Shaw. John VR is a switch hitter batting from the left side. He's just not that good. And Eric Sogard's all the way down at the 8th spot. I mean, I'd rather just use the Toronto guys. Like, if you need a second baseman, Travis is 3,100. He's a better play than Sogard, I think. So let's, I don't know, you have anything else on the Brewers and Blue Jays? Because there are other offenses that I want to talk about. And I think for full stacks, there are teams that are also worth considering.
No, dive right in. Feel free ahead.
Okay, so the other team that I mentioned last night, they don't have a lineup yet, but I guess I'll just briefly cover them. The A's are playing at home against the Rangers, and Doug Fister is not as bad as some of the pitchers that we, the veterans that we say are really, really awful and we love to target against them. But Fister is probably below average. He had a decent year last year with a velocity increase, but the velocity on opening day was a little lower than it was last year, and he isn't young at all. I think he's 35. I'm just pulling up his page. 34 years old. And I'll just read off the velocity numbers real quick. He was throwing right around 90 last year, and on opening day he was in the high 80s. It was like a 1.5 mile per hour drop, 88.4 average fastball velocity on opening day. And he did shut down sort of the Astros, but he did it without really having any good peripherals, or just he didn't pitch well. He just didn't give up runs. So he had 3 strikeouts, 3 walks in 5 innings. And one thing that's notable from that game is there was a ton of sharp money on the under in that game. And I actually watched it, and I didn't know why before the game started, but the umpire for that game had a massive strike zone, and Fister was getting every call in the corner. So it didn't really lead to extra strikeouts, but it kept his walks down, and it also forced the Houston hitters to have to chase a little bit, I think. So it was kind of just a good circumstance for Fister, and I don't think we should expect him to be good going forward. So I definitely like the Oakland hitters against him for their home run upside, especially Matt Olson and Chris Davis. So what do you think about the A's as a stack?
Yeah, I like the A's as a stack. Not as a stack actually, just the two hitters alluded on. Outside of that, their hitters just don't really generate that much power, and when you're going against a ground ball pitcher, it's you touched on this in other podcasts and stuff. Just the angle and the swing of the home run hitters creates. You can allude to it more, but creates what is it exactly?
Yeah, so when you have a ground ball pitcher and fly ball hitters, like the mismatch of their styles tends to create more hard hits. So that's good for fly ball hitters like Chris Davis and Matt Olson. But I also think it's a good spot for Jed Lowry and Matt Joyce. I mean, Fister's just not very good. The Rangers don't have a good bullpen, and they also had to use their bullpen a lot over the last few games. So it's a tired bullpen. I think Alex Claudio pitched a couple innings last night. They don't really have anyone that's that good. Keone Kella's a decent late inning reliever, but if Oakland's winning, you're going to see a lot of below average relievers and even right-handed hitters like Stephen Piscotty, Marcus Semien, Matt Chapman, Jonathan Lucroy. Like I think they're fine to use, but Lowry, Olson, and Davis batting 2 through 4. That's probably where they'll be in the order. I think are all strong plays. Matt Joyce is either going to be batting first or fifth. I definitely like him more if he's batting first, but I still like him if he's batting fifth. So the A's are a team that I'll stack for sure. I think I still like the Blue Jays more, but the A's are close for me, and I do like them more than the Brewers. And then there's maybe one or two other offenses that I'm somewhat interested in. But I guess, are you more on board with the rest of the A's guys, or are you just sticking to them as plugs?
I think I'm on board with Lowry and Joyce, and just like you said, Joyce contingent on where he hits in the order, but if he hits leadoff, he definitely offers a ton of value. Do you want to touch on the minor bit of sharp money that's hitting the over in this Seattle San Francisco game, since we haven't talked about the pitchers or the hitters on this game?
Yeah, I'll just mention the other game that we're not considering first: the Rockies and the Padres. Clayton Richard is just kind of average. He doesn't really get strikeouts, so even in a good matchup at home against Colorado, I wouldn't use him. But I also wouldn't really target against him because he gets ground balls. He's not awful. The Padres have a good bullpen. The Rockies are just really expensive, and it's a road game. So whenever they're away from Coors, I mean, it takes some really perfect circumstances to target the Rockies when they're away from Coors. They just have to basically be cheap enough where it's worth it, and that's not the case here. Definitely not using the Padres offense since we're basically all in on John Gray. So the only game that leaves is the Mariners Giants game. And the sharp money is pretty heavily on the over. I think Felix Hernandez and Johnny Cueto both have a lot more name value than their actual performance suggests. Both of them were good on opening day. Cueto didn't really pitch well. He just limited the Dodgers to no runs, but he only had 4 strikeouts in 7 innings. And Cueto has been pretty mediocre over the last few years. He was bad last year for most of the season. I think he's okay. I think Felix Hernandez is okay, but we're still seeing the total go up. It opened at 7. It's almost at 8 now, and that's with the public betting the under. So sharper money is on the over, and that's even more alarming because Nelson Cruz is out. That's the big missing player for Seattle. So in spite of that, the over is still rising. And then Evan Longoria is out of the lineup tonight too, and that's not getting factored in either. I think because there's so much more expected output relative to perception that even with those guys missing, it's still probably a good spot for both those offenses. The wind is interesting too. It's blowing out very strongly, but AT&T Park kind of limits wind effect. So I'll say it's a mild wind boost, but nothing special, even if it's 15 to 20 miles an hour. And then just looking at the prices, I mean, everyone's really cheap. Like D. Gordon, Gene Segura, Mitch Haniger, Kyle Seager are all in the mid 3,000s. Cano's 4,200. Those are prices that the Mariners would usually have in bad matchups. I think this is probably more like a neutral matchup. And then the Giants, I mean, Brandon Belt batting second at 3,300 against the right-handed pitcher. I think that's a really strong spot. That's probably going to be one of my favorite, if not the favorite, first base plug that I use. The problem is that we have a lot of first basemen to choose from tonight. We have Smoke, we have Thames, we have Matt Olson. So I don't know how much Belt I'll use, but I do like him for his price, maybe more than anyone else. McCutcheon's 3.7. I think this is a decent night to pay up for Buster Posey. There's just a lot of cheap hitters in the Giants lineup. So there's upside for Felix, but I think there's downside for Felix too. And the line movement suggests that there should be more runs than people think. So this could be a pretty low-owned game, and I think both teams have a amount of upside.
Yeah, I would agree with you. But for the most part, I think it's going to be just thinking of batters from the teams we already mentioned. And are you sure you're not, inclined to fade John Gray after seeing Christian Villanueva is back in the lineup in the fourth hole?
I definitely am not. Okay, so we do have a Padres lineup. That's what you're saying?
Yeah.
All right, let's see. I'm just loading it. No, I don't care about Christian Villanueva. I mean, if John Gray was left-handed, maybe. So Will Myers is out. That's definitely a boost. Who else is missing here? So Manuel Margot is also not playing. This is a really easy matchup for John Gray, even compared to what we originally thought. Like, I think you can definitely justify using John Gray in all of your lineups. This is a weaker Padres offense than I even thought we could anticipate. I mean, any team could score runs against anyone. These are all major league players, but you're not going to get too much better value than someone as good as John Gray, especially on the road with the strikeout upside at only 8.5K in a matchup in a neutral park against a terrible offense that strikes out a lot. I mean, it's basically perfect. It's close to perfect. So I think the move is, if you're playing lower stakes, all in on John Gray. If you're playing higher stakes, I mean, maybe you could consider an ownership fade, but this is an even stronger spot than I think any of us thought it would be.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Do we have any last-second questions or anything you want?
If anyone listening has questions, throw them out there. But I think we covered all the concerns. Yeah, it doesn't look like we have questions. So
yeah,
let's wrap it up.
Yeah, just to wrap it up, all in on John Gray after seeing the Padres lineup, and maybe a 60-40 or 55-45 split between favor of Aaron Sanchez and Sean Manaea. And the Blue Jays are our favorite offense, followed by the A's and the Brewers left. Right? That about does it?
Yeah, I think I think I put the Mariners and Giants in a similar category as the Brewers, but yeah, Blue Jays, A's, and then those three teams mixed in. I think that's probably the route for me.
All right, that about does it for today's pre-lock RotoPros show for MLB DFS. And what do we have for tomorrow?
Let's see. We do it too soon, so I guess we'll just we'll put out a message on Twitter or in the Slack chat for people in there, and we'll figure it out then.
All right. We'll catch you guys tomorrow.